Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today, a monthly treat, my conversation with the scholars from the edge of time, Nicholas Diak and Michele Brittany. Greetings and welcome, most scholars.
Greetings. How are you doing, Hercules?
I'm doing great. It's always a pleasure speaking with both of you.
Always good to see you, sir.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to hear of your adventures since last time. You're always having adventures in publishing and adventures in convention speaking and all sorts of other.
Well, I'd say still a slow start to the year, but we've got some things going on. I think Michele actually has more stuff than me, so ladies first this time.
Okay. So, we don't always, I think we kind of talk more about our different projects and while they're ongoing. And I know for myself, the Mummy book is right now with the writers as they write their respective essays. Those are not due until I think the end of June, if I remember correctly. In the meantime, I, continue to look at books, and when we're out and about, if I come across books that might be good for my library or good for research. And I have four, and I will try to keep it a little bit brief. But I have one that I picked up last weekend at actually used bookstore. This book came out, this particular version came out probably about 6 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, but it's Mythology, Timeless, Timeless Tales of Gods and Heroes by Edith Hamilton. And I wanted to bring this up because it's actually a very nice edition because of the illustrations. I know I bought Nick a version of this, an earlier edition. This is the 75th anniversary. This actually originally came out back in like the 1940s.
Yes.
And so anyway, the illustrations in it are really quite lovely. It's kind of a more armchair enthusiast type of reading. Here's just one example of one of the illustrations, if you can see it through the cattail, and a Minotaur story. And so what it does is it talks about kind of the early gods in Greek mythologies and religions, and then it kind of dwells, kind of overlays with the Greek and Roman writers of mythology, and then it goes in and has several different stories. So like Minotaur, Hercules, your namesake, and many others included. This originally is, I think, was like $30 or more, and $40, and I got it for like about 15. So got a pretty good deal on this, given
Sorry.
it's quite a nice edition, and it is a hardback.
Here in
So
the Northeast, that edition is available at Barnes and Noble. If anybody has a Barnes and Noble next to them, that edition is available there, and it's a beautiful edition.
yeah, I would totally agree. And I think it's, for anybody that's interested in mythology, ancient civilization, particularly the Greek and Roman, I think this is a really good one, especially if, for obvious veterans who understand mythologies, but also for people that are starting to kind of, get an interest in mythology. I think this is a great starter book. I have Nick is digging.
There, my copy.
Yay! I have both of those copies. That is awesome.
Yeah. This one also has illustrations, but they're definitely more of an earlier kind of woodcut. But let me show you an example of that one. So, a little different take on the different stories, but definitely worthwhile having either or both. Talking about the Mummy book, I have been on kind of a hunt for books to put in my library, but also in anticipation of editing different essays that'll cover literature, mythologies, mummies in pop culture and things like that. So I have three. The first one is Ancient Egypt in Modern Imagination, Art, Literature, and Culture, by Eleanor Dobson and Nicola Tonks. This is from Bloomsbury Press. So this is going to be more of a, academic take. Definitely I have a heavier reading, but it does have, the sources included in it. So if you are interested in kind of like a newer approach and a rediscussion of ancient Egypt in our modern pop culture, this would be a good book to consider. It is definitely more academic, just to give a warning there. But I think it'll be a good book. The next one I have is from Basil Glenn. It's called The Mummy on Screen, or Orientalism and Monstrosity in Horror Cinema. And this is also from Bloomsbury, and also another academic book. This one came out in the last couple of years. Bloomsbury was having a sale on books, and I thought this would be a very good one, especially if you are kind of researching and getting a better understanding about a mummy, then Orientalism is going to be one of the lenses and kind of one of the theories that's very important in looking and examining the mummy in pop culture. So this is definitely also a worthwhile book for those that are interested in understanding a bit more about that. And the last one is a little bit more of an armchair, a little more encyclopedia in nature. It's from Brian Sin. It is Mummy Movies, A Comprehensive Guide. This just came out in this past year, I think like last fall. It is from McFarlane. It's from the publisher that Nick and I have published between us probably about four books. Great publisher. It has a good introduction to mummies, kind of talking about, within culture, within archaeological history, and just kind of a nice kind of overarching review. Again, a bit more armchair, but I think it's a good start. And then, of course, if you've ever wanted to know, I think I'd like to know if there was a movie about mummies made back in the 50s. I mean, you could go in there and dig around in there. I don't remember how many movies are listed in here. I think it's like about 150, maybe a little bit more than that. But it is a very comprehensive book. It gives a description of each movie, tells you what year, that kind of thing, and gives you kind of a synopsis. Lots of pictures in this one as well, which is kind of nice because in academic books, you don't always get a lot of pictures, but this one there is. So this one's a little pricier. I think this one, I got it on sale. McFarlane does have sales every so often. So, keep this in your queue and then just wait for a sale if you want. But I think these are typically around $70.
And then pluck up the new Peplum when it's on sale too.
Yep.
Plug.
So those are just a few of the new books that I've added to my collection. And I wanted to share them with the audience in case they need some new books to read and are kind of curious about, the books that we're reading, well, for me anyway, and what I look at, some of the different books that I'm looking at when I'm doing research.
Those are great books. It's like, ooh, I want to get those.
Yeah, and I'll have to put a picture up on the appropriate Facebook page as well. So I'll get that up in probably tomorrow. So with that, what about you, Nick? Anything new on your side?
I haven't really bought anything, or if I did, I've forgotten it. But I do have a new article at my website. I did a retrospective of an industrial compilation that came back out in 2004. It's called 12 Caesars.
Oh,
It is how do I put it? It's full of industrial bands, drone bands, and ambient bands, and each of them has a song about a specific Caesar. So Julius, Augustus, Tiberius, all the way up to Domitian. And even though the CD is 20 years old, it's way out of print. It's not often that the world of industrial music and antiquity kind of come together. Usually, industrial music is more focused on more postmodern topics, not older history than that. So whenever those two worlds collide, I'm like all over it. You know, like example last year when I did that book on essay on industrial bands that sample dialogue from Gladiator. So I like that sort of thing. And so I did a retrospective of that album. I actually was able to talk to two of the bands on it and interview them and how they went about composing their songs. A lot of it involved watching I, Claudius and Caligula to get the the mood down. And also the CD came with like these cards that each of them represent one of the Caesars. They even have, I don't know, it's just a nice ornate thing, a very snapshot of industrial music back in the aughts, a long kind of forgotten gem, but it was nice to dive into, nice to talk about those two very polar opposite genres coming together, and to talk about with some of the bands that were on it. Actually, most of the bands on it are long since defunct. There's actually, I think, only 3 of them left. So I was able to talk to 2 of them.
And if I may interject, there is a book called The 12 Caesars, written by Mary Beard. Came out within the last couple of years again, I believe. I know I got my copy from Barnes and Nobles, actually. And it's a really good book. I've actually started reading it. And it talks about kind of a cultural analysis of the 12 Caesars and their portrayal in culture, be it literature, art, and more recently within our movies, comics and things like that. And she kind of breaks down and goes through the 12 Caesars. And it's an excellent book. I'm not very far into it, but already I'm like, wow, this is a really deep analysis, and definitely, again, worth the interest for people that would like to know more.
Yeah, the 12 Caesars in this compilation goes back even further to the book that was done by, and I'm going to mispronounce this, by Suetonius, who was the first one to really write about that stuff way back in 121 AD. So, yeah, so that was kind of a nice project to realize. So that's at my website if folks want to go take a gander at it. That's probably the big thing, still working on the Emmanuel book and, small stuff here and there. But that's been it was a ad hoc project that came out of the blue. The opportunity is there, and I seized upon it. So to do the 12 Caesars thing.
That is awesome. While we're speaking of 12 Caesars, I'm going to be modifying all the programs a little bit. And one of the modifications made to the Sword and Sandal Cinema group of programs is going to be, it's not just going to be about cinema. So if you want to talk about comic books, if you want to talk about anything,
She's the comic book lady.
any type of platform at all, it'll be part of the new conversations. So just to let you know. I know that all the time, but now it's going to be allowed on all the other shows.
Oh, that's excellent. I think that's a great segue to pull in all these other types of sources. The films are fantastic, and I think they're, pretty easy to get a hold of. I mean, because you've got what is it, Tubi and Freevee and Prime and Netflix and things like that. So I think that interjecting some of these other mediums will be great.
I had a question about one of your Egyptian books on the mummy movies. Are they covering, how fringy are they getting into? Because there's some really fringy mummy movies that were made, like Mummy's Kiss in 3D, and there were all sorts of. Yes.
Yeah, I think you'd have to tell me if you're looking for a specific movie. They do, the author does say that he didn't include, like, there's actually mummy porn out there. He He did not include that in here. If
Okay.
it was kind of soft or, you know, maybe a little fringy, it's in here, but if it's straight up porn, yeah, sorry, folks.
Seduction Cinema or EI Entertainment, they had put out a couple of those. They were kind of like soft core, and starred Misty Monday.
Oh, okay.
Not so long ago, but I remember they did that, and then there were a couple of like Alien Mummy, which was kind of like one of those really fringe mummy movies.
There was definitely, I remember seeing a picture in here, it made me stop because it was a pretty provocative picture. And I think it was the mummy lover or something like that. I'll continue to kind of thumb through here and see if I can get to it. But I thought, wow, okay, that's definitely in the sexual territory.
Yes, there's all sorts of weird stuff floating out there. Remember the days of VHS and mom and pop movie stores? There was all sorts of movies that I'd never heard of and never heard of subsequently.
Yeah.
They were in those mom and pop stores, and a lot of them were monster movies and mummy movies, and all sorts of movies.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it just seems like I think about, you know, all the films that were out there as a VHS, and now how difficult it is to get some movies that that maybe came out 5 or 10, 15 years ago. And maybe it wasn't very popular, so they've never done a reprint.
Right.
So, yeah. Any other news for you?
No.
No, you good? All right.
I'm good.
All right. Well, I think we need to maybe switch gears and talk about a particular movie.
All right. So tonight's movie, we are continuing our retrospective of Bella Cortez's sword and sandal appearances.
Right.
So tonight we will be discussing the Tartars.
All right.
All right. So it is plot time. Oleg and his army of Vikings pay a visit to Toghrul and his Tartar men at their camp in the steppes of Eastern Europe / Western Russia. Initially a friendly visit, with Oleg bringing gifts of pelts, it turns turbulent when Torgur, can't say his name, asks Oleg to join forces and attack the Slavs, a group of peoples that the Vikings are friendly with. Angered at being rebuffed, Toghrul attempts to kill Oleg, and a melee breaks out between the two small armies. During the skirmish, Oleg axes Toghrul and commands his band to retreat back to their Viking fort. In the process, Oleg's brother Eric becomes smitten with Toghrul's daughter Samia and kidnaps her. With Toghrul slain, his brother Burundai becomes Khan of the Tartars, and he has aspirations of great conquest of the West, starting with the obliteration of the Viking fort. Meanwhile, at said fort, Eric becomes more smitten with Samia and makes advances on her, which are initially rebuffed, but eventually she gives in. Oleg, fearing the Tartars, sends his wife Helga away by boat back to the Viking lands. However, en route, her boat is attacked by the Tartars, and she and her handmaidens are kidnapped. Brought back to the Tartar castle, Burundai tortures one of the maidens and starts to lust after Helga. That night, the Tartars host a lavish party of dancers wielding scimitars and mock battling each other. But during the feast, Burundai poisons Helga, and she is taken back to his quarters where he rapes her. Furious at his wife's abduction, Oleg agrees to a hostage exchange at the Tartar castle, Samia for Helga. The meeting does not go well for the Vikings. A very drugged Helga falls from the Tartar castle, fatally injuring herself, and the group of Viking warriors are then attacked by the Tartars, Burundai actually having no use for having Samia back at all. Because he's going against Tartar tradition and beliefs, Burundai's advisors leave him only to be recaptured and beheaded by the Khan. Meanwhile, an enraged Oleg wants to execute Samia, but Eric steps in and declares his love for her and that she is carrying his child. Oleg puts the duo before a court made of Viking leaders, casting their votes by axe tossing. The final vote comes down to Oleg, but before he can do so, the Viking settlement is attacked by the Tartars. Oleg releases Eric so they can all join in the battle. The Vikings are greatly outnumbered, the Tartars breaching their walls and storming their courtyard. Oleg and Burundai battle it out 1-on-1, with Oleg victorious after he drowns the Khan in the river. But his victory is short-lived as a Tartar archer shoots him in the back. His final act, as the Viking fort is overran, is to wave goodbye to Eric and Samia as they flee from the siege on their boat.
Wow.
Oh, that's a long one. No snark in that one.
I know. I was almost going to ask you where the snarkiness was later, but you didn't have any snark in there.
When I snark, it's for play. I love these movies.
Yeah.
But overall, what was your general feeling of the Tartars?
We've talked on the side before the show, and I think that there were some pretty good plot twists. I thought there was good narrative beats, surprises in the story, the way the story went. There was also some dark themes and situations which actually took me by surprise. However, it was peppered quite a bit by some miscasting, and I would say some kind of cringe-worthy moments. Otherwise, I would have said if it didn't have those things going on, this would have been probably kind of a
well ahead of its time film.
Yeah. So, what about you?
Same Viking boat as Michele. It's a 50-50 movie. It is more fascinating than anything. It is a dark film. It goes against the grain on everything like I normally see in traditional peplum, so I have to commend it for that. But oh boy, is it hampered by, I'd say, bad writing, and I was going to say bad acting, but it's more maybe miscasting more than bad acting. There's some like moments that we just looked at each other like, so yeah, this is a dark film. The good guys lose. We're assuming, the Vikings are the good guys, which usually they're kind of the bad guys in the classic peplum, but anyway, they're the good guys in this film. They lose. There's off-screen raping. It's dour. It's at odds against other peplum, especially like what we're used to, like with strongmen peplum that are more like fun and heroic and optimistic. Hercules comes in and saves the day. And even like the toga and sandal films that are more like political intrigue, they usually end with the good guy winning. Even as Rome burns, someone walks away like, okay, we won. No, this film's dour. This is interesting in the canon of classic peplum, and how is it fatalistic or nihilistic? The word I want to use. It is.
Maybe both.
Maybe both.
Yeah, I was actually quite surprised by. Yes, I would agree with you that I feel like Vikings tend to be the very, they're the tribe that comes into town, so to speak, and overrides everybody, that they are more advanced. And in this movie, I actually commend it for taking a different approach with regards to the Vikings. The Vikings are kind of like, they're either good guys or they're kind of, in the middle of the road. I'm not sure that I really went necessarily either side initially, but then it kind of leaned more towards Vikings because of them not really treating Samia, terribly like Burunda did with
Orson Welles.
Orson Welles did with Helga.
We will be talking a lot about the two male leads in this film.
Yeah. But I also like the fact that we're getting a different story, like we had with Hercules and the Mongols.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of in that realm, but it is still a bit different, and it definitely took a bit of a different turn. Like we said at the beginning, there was a lot of different twists within the story. But I did like that for a sword and sandal, we went eastward, we went towards Russia. And I thought that was actually a new and kind of refreshing storytelling locale and kind of players that were coming in that were being presented in this sword and sandal story.
I think Hercules and the Mongols is a really good comparison for this film for subject matter. While like the Mongols in that film are more barbaric and tribal like. I am not an expert on uh Asian history or anything, so you'll have to forgive me for that, but that's just the impression that movie gives compared to the portrayal of the Tartars slash Mongols in this film, which they have a castle and it's full of extravagance and opulence and stuff like that, so they're more civilized compared to what we saw in Hercules and the Mongols, which is, far different way. Now, side note, there's yellow face galore in both films, so that's bad. Was for the time, but it's just interesting that Hercules and the Mongols portrayed him more barbaric, but that film is way more, I'm going to say, lighthearted and fun. In fact, that's Mark Forrest in that one, right? If I'm not mistaken. And he's kind of the laid back Hercules, hanging by the river and just chilling. While this one is, oh boy, is it dour. But this is a spectacle, peplum, and because it headed east, it had some newer things to it that we don't typically see, like the Russian steppes. I love the landscape shots in this film. It lends really well to the horse riding sequences, but these rolling green hills and stuff like that. It was a really cool, I'd say, setting that we don't normally see in Sword and Sandal. And even though it's like a bare bones setting, it still looked different, exotic, definitely Eastern European, and we're there. This isn't just a crap set built somewhere. It looks majestic.
Yeah, and I would compare a lot of the kind of landscaping, the Vikings riding their horses across the landscape, very in comparison to the early or the Western films of the same period, John Ford's Westerns, Sam Peckinpah, where you get these really wide arching shots. And I think this was done in a Technicolor, a special scope. So you really got that impression that this is a very epic movie.
Now it looks epic, but you peel back the layers, it's not as epic as it looks. In fact, there's a little bit of bluster to make it look more epic than it really is. So like example, the axe throwing voting, oh my God, they're throwing by hit that pillar for an axe for yes, hit that pillar for an axe for no. That's just kind of over the top. Ooh, it's bluster. It's fake epicness. Or the Vikings calibrate their catapults by shooting it at each other. You don't do that. So they make some, I would say, what should be kind of normal day-to-day stuff more over the top than it needs to be to give even more epicness to the film. The movie starts and ends with big battle sequences, a horseback sieging a fort and everything, but sandwiched between those two battles is mostly, it's not quite intrigue or diplomacy, but it does veer into Toga and Sentinel territory. But it's a lot of like kind of sitting around like, I want to take over the world. Well, I want my person back. We got to be afraid of the Tartars and failed love story. So it's got good book things. It's got great locations. This is that kind of middle part where this kind of flumps a little.
Yeah, and I think part of that, and you might agree, is that the storylines for the kind of the four main characters really mirror each other. So there isn't a lot of variety to the storytelling and what's happening between all four of the characters. We're talking Oleg, Eric, Samia, Burundi, you know, on the Tartar side, they're all motivated by, you know, greed, wanting to get more land, or they want to take over and have the treasures of the Slavs. While the Vikings are, I don't know, I think they're not exactly sure what they're all looking for. We don't really know a whole lot of their motivation, because they're in a land that they've basically negotiated to have an ability to have a fort, which again seems kind of
Are they there to
counterintuitive.
trade? Are they to battle? We don't know much of the Vikings' motivations.
And what we do here does seem to kind of be counter to what we kind of believe Vikings to be
In pop culture.
in pop culture. So that's kind of, you know, it's like, how is it that they decided to portray the Vikings a bit differently?
So about those characters, oh boy, do we have characters.
Yep.
I think we gotta start with the biggest one, and that's Orson Welles.
Mm-hmm.
Orson Welles plays the main villain, the Burundi. So this is, you know, later in his career where he's doing acting, because, you know, he always had issues getting his directing work off the ground because, you know, financing and, you know, production companies would interfere and all that stuff. But he did his fair share of acting, and this is one of those movies he was in. Oh boy, what a paradox he is. He is in yellowface, and he looks bad. He is constantly squinting, and he's got, you know, painted on eyebrows that are at a slant. We're talking Mickey Rooney level in Breakfast at Tiffany's, you know, territory here. So he looks bad. However, despite this, dude, this guy, he is giving 110%. Oh my God, he is over the top. He nails being like creepy and lecherous and treacherous and warmongering and cunning. In fact, it's funny, through the entire film, he actually holds all the cards. He's always one step ahead of the Vikings. He is quite cunning and military smart. And in fact, I think even early in the film, they said he's like a commander out there doing his thing. But man, there's some cutaway shots of him just like kind of leering at Helga going, yeah, you know, and you're both going, but at the same time, like, it's a creepy but that's what that character would do. And man, is he owning it. So, and plus his monologues, I have to think that they let him do what he wanted to do. Either he got to rewrite his own lines or improv, because his monologues are very Orson Welles, when Orson Welles would do like his TV interviews and go on tirades and very ornate like storytelling, that's present in this film.
Yeah, and he a few times he delivers the line, "I am your Khan."
Yeah.
You know, he is definitely driven to become, you know, greater than Genghis Khan is really his motivation in this film. And the first stop is to annihilate the Vikings. Not to, you know, save Samia, his niece, but for
Who he's supposed to wed. That's the philosophy or the legends or whatever, is Samia is supposed to marry the Great Khan.
Mm-hmm.
Burundai is supposed to be the Great Khan, ergo she is supposed to marry him, and that's, you know, what's supposed to happen according to imperial decree or the scroll, you know, whatever history you want to give to the Tartars in this movie.
Yeah, but he, you know, he has no interest in that. It's all about having the power. And you know, he wants the gold, he wants the power, he wants all of it. And so, you know, he plays that well.
It's funny because of that, he nullifies Oleg, who's played by Victor Mature, who we'll talk about here in a second. You know, Victor thinks, Oleg thinks he has the ace in his sleeve. He's got Samia, that's their hostage and their captive or whoever. And, you know, I'll barter with her. The Tartars want to attack us because we have her. And Burned, I could care less. And I think that's interesting, where you think you have the ace and
Mhm.
you really don't. And I think that's an element that probably with a little bit better storytelling and directing could turn into some really good intrigue or something, because that leads to Bella Cortez's character, who we'll talk about after we talk about Victor Mature, not being used as good as she should be used in this film. But
Yeah, definitely.
so next up is Victor Mature. He's our hero. He's the leader of the Vikings. He's Oleg. Um, what's awkward about him is he has been in lots of peplum. Just going down the list: Egyptian. I got one: Demetrius and the Gladiators, The Robe, Samson and Delilah, the Spear and Fang film, 1,000,000 BC, other historic epics. Oh man, does he look out of place as a Viking? He's got like this slick back hair with a couple strands coming in front because he's got to look stylish. But which is weird, because if you remember the other year or so, we talked about Ursus in the Valley of the Lion. And,
Yeah.
Ed Ferry's in that. We made comments about his well-coiffed hair. But it works for him, I think. Sure, it's a little silly, but I still buy into it that he's a strong man. He's an Ursus. He just, even though he's living with lions, that's his hair. It doesn't look too out of place. I'm sorry, Victor Mature's super stylized hair is not Viking hair, and maybe it's just like the way he's kind of an older school actor, that maybe the more authoritative Grecian/Roman roles suit that better, where being a more like an imperial commander is more suited to him than a Viking leader, and he just looks out of place.
Yeah, additionally to his physical appearance, his costume seems out of place as well. He is all in black, and he has
Studs
like silver studs, and then he's got a breastplate in the front.
and short shorts,
And
because those
very,
back gams are all showing off.
yeah, I mean, he has great legs, great gams. But he is the only one in the entire costumed people that has this really short skirt. He's always in that outfit, and I don't know enough of his filmography that maybe that costume came from somewhere else. Maybe he said, I will wear black no matter what. But
I was reading IMDb trivia.
Mhm.
Apparently, per Orson Welles, but you have to take this with a grain of salt with all of Orson Welles' stories, that apparently Victor Mature demanded his sandals to be a couple inches higher so he would appear taller. So he has some authority over what he's wearing.
oh, so there we go.
What am I
So
saying?
yeah, so it's quite possible that was his demand, and boy, does he look out of place. He is commanding enough as a leader, but whether he's a Viking leader, no, but I could definitely see him in other sword and sandal films,
Like a
where
Roman
he's,
centurion.
yeah, if he was a Roman centurion, absolutely, I totally would buy it. But in this particular film, not so much.
This is one of the last films he did make in his career, so he's definitely winding down at this point.
Yeah,
Sure.
and maybe it was a little bit more of a paycheck, part for him, who knows? But he also doesn't have a lot of chemistry with really any of the characters, and particularly
The
uh,
women.
the women, but specifically the actress that plays Helga, his wife. And they're meant to be very loving, and it does not congeal
He is
between
a
those
terrible kisser. We'll put it this flat out, say it. The close-ups of him trying to fish kiss his wife are awkward as heck. He maybe when he was younger, he could pull the more dashing film noir smooches off or something. Oh no, not in this film. He's a terrible smoocher, and it looks awkward.
Yeah, and I mean, and who knows, maybe, it's acting with someone who maybe doesn't speak English, or, bad day, who knows? But it definitely, the
Yeah, Helga was played by an Italian actress who starred in a fair share of Italian genre films, a lot of
Yeah.
peplum and other stuff. So
very pretty woman. I mean, she definitely kind of fit the mold to be a wife. To be Helga had some presence. But we'll also talk about women a bit in this film. But it just, yeah, it didn't congeal for me.
I think the last thing to say about Oleg slash Victor Mature is you said he's not maybe a Viking leader. I'm just going to flat out say he's not a good leader, period, in this film, which again goes against what I said at the very beginning was this film kind of goes against the grain of a lot of what we see in Sword and Sandal, and I'd say in heroic films, and totally. Our hero here, Oleg, he's clumsy and he's just not a great leader. He's more focused on like putting his brother Eric and Samia on trial. And while that's going on, his fort gets, attacked, ambushed by the Tartars. He, in his hostage exchange, he agrees to meet at the Tartars fort right outside their gate. So he loses all advantage. Usually, I think like hostage exchanges take place in somewhere neutral, like let's go to a hill way out here so no one has advantage. He's like, nope, I'll just meet up. I would say he's more impulsive and emotive driven, and it makes him a bad leader, I think.
Yeah, he even comments, one of his lines of dialogue is that he knows it's a trap, and he even says as much. He even goes into Barandai's castle and meets with him in his court. And all the soldiers and so forth are standing at attention. They just look more put together. It very interesting.
Our third character, and we'll talk about our fourth character at the same time, is Samia, who is Bella Cortez, who is the main linkage on these retrospectives. Unfortunately, she just doesn't get any screen time, and she has little to work with. Even though she's really pretty, the movie doesn't capitalize on her beauty. Like Eric is supposed to like fall in love with her instantly, but there's no film techniques happening to really emphasize her. In a more like old school thing, you would have like a soft focus shot on her, looking like that. Or I hate to say it, but I don't mean to objectify her, but show off her body or something like that. This movie does not accentuate that's probably the word I'm looking for, her in any way. She's just kind of there, and she's there to be a damsel in distress. I don't know why she falls in love with Eric. It might be Stockholm syndrome, because our fourth character, Eric, he's creepier than Burndeye. He's forcing himself onto Samia, trying to, his kissing is even worse than Victor Matures, because he's like trying to, kiss her cheek and neck, and she's like, no, I don't want none of that. So it's very creepy. And this is our second hero. This is the guy.
You guys froze up.
Oh,
Let's see if I could pause for a second.
okay. I think we just left off on, not sure why Samia falls in love with Eric, because Stockholm syndrome or something, but he just forces himself onto her, and it's really cringy and really creepy. And compare her role in this to like Vulcan, son of Jupiter, which we talked about last month. That movie, she has agency. She does stuff. She talks. She goes on adventures. She fights other people. Wields a whip. In this film, I'm sad that she wasn't used or capitalized on as what she's capable of. And I think this is like one of her early films, and I don't know, but she's there. They just didn't use her. They just made her a damsel in distress. That's it.
Yeah, it's odd, as it was an odd choice in a way. Helga got a little bit of agency when she's standing before Burundi in his court, and he wants to know certain information about the Vikings. But Samia really never does get that agency, and it's too bad because we actually, we enjoyed her in Vulcan, right?
Vulcan, Son of Jupiter.
Son of Jupiter. Really enjoyed her having some power, having agency to actually have a catalyst over the progression of the story and her involvement in the different characters. And here, particularly in this movie where you have Victor Mature and you have Orson Welles, that, this is a time where they could have used some of the other characters to create a really interesting, more dynamic story, particularly since they did seem like they were trying to go some different directions with the story. One of the things that we didn't mention, there were 6 writers for this film.
What was it, 6? It was at least 6. It was a lot.
It was 6 writers. I went and counted again.
Okay.
And of course, we're watching the credits, and I turned to Nick and I said, "That's never good if you've got 6 writers for an 83-minute film."
We just speculate each writer just wanted their one specific point put in the film, and it just hodgepodged it.
Yeah, just not quite sure why there wasn't a bit more creativity and cohesiveness and kind of uniqueness to the storytelling.
Which also led to dropped plot points.
It did. Just real quick, back to Samia and Eric. Yeah, again, kind of like Oleg and Hilda, there wasn't a whole lot of chemistry. And it also, like you said, with the plot holes, there's also a lack of kind of cohesiveness with the passage of time. She's captured, she's back at the Viking camp. Eric comes in, they have a conversation, and then it seems like a day or two later, they have another conversation where he's like, well, I want my child we can go to the mountains and, we'll have a family. And we're like, what? How long has the passage of time? Is she pregnant now in just a couple of days?
It doesn't help that the Viking fort and the Tartar fort must be like 30-minute horse rides from each other, because they ride back and forth fairly quick. And so
yeah,
I think it's just a combination of like bad editing and just kind of forcing the plot so it makes it quicker than it really, because this movie, it's shot as if it takes place over a couple days, but I suspect it's actually taken place over a couple weeks.
Or maybe even a couple of months or something, for them to have their dalliance and for her to be pregnant. You need a little more than a couple of weeks, for her to know that she's pregnant. But it's pretty inconsistent, and it did kind of like foible with that. And I think you made a good judgment that it kind of forces the story. You've got some great fighting sequences at the beginning and at the end, but it seems like they kind of floundered through the story in the middle section.
Yeah, things are happening because the script says so. Like especially between Samia and Eric, because there's no story there. They don't, the camera never really follows Eric. You don't really get to see his thoughts. The brief glances we get of him is he's like, he's not charismatic. He's kind of, I don't know. He's
kind of one-dimensional.
Very one-dimensional.
I think that's also part of the problem with the movie, is the fact that nobody gets any sort of like real agency. We don't get a lot of character studies, so they do seem.
I think Orson Welles is trying, though. I mean, he's trying with his character.
Yes. But I just feel that every character, we don't really get a true buy-in. I think the only character, well, besides Burundi, who was, Orson Welles was fantastic to watch on screen.
for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, for many reasons. The other character that I actually kind of like, and I felt like had some amount of growth and change through the story is Clue Dang, who is the high priest. He is the advisor to Torgil, and then he transfer over, and then he is the advisor to Burundi. And we see he is trying to keep to, we treat the hostages a certain way, some sort of agreement there. He's always trying to tell them, hey, we need to get Samia back. That's what's important. That's our mission here. And he kind of seems to go both ways, but then he kind of sets on his path and decides, when Burundi says, I am Khan, I am going to be over all of it. That's when Kulang, he doesn't say anything. He just turns around and walks away.
Mhm.
And he's done, because he's trying to be a voice of reason.
And the worst thing you could do to a narcissist person is flat out ignore him and not respond to him.
Yep, and that's what he did.
Mhm.
So,
And then he gets beheaded for it.
yeah,
He gets the axe to the, well, you don't see it.
no,
As dark as this movie is, everything, it's pretty bloodless actually. Everything happens off screen. Sex scenes, the rape scenes, beheadings. A lot of it is all implied and off screen, but it's not like hush hush implied. It's there. They say it. When Victor Mature and Helga are walking to their sectioned off room and it fades, we know what's going on there.
yeah.
But some things we don't know what's going on with. There are some plot points that just get dropped in this film. The first one is the Slavs. So
Yes.
the catalyst for the entire film, the whole reason everything even unfolds in this film is the Vikings come up to the Tartars for friendship reasons. They kind of go back, I guess. Here's some pelts. Oh, this is awesome. And then the Tartars like, hey, do you want to join forces and kill the Slavs? And the Vikings are like, no. And they even make a scene later, like they're our friends. And they make a scene later, like, here, take this horn or something and go tell the Slavs that the Tartars are going to get you. And so that was my cue of thinking, oh, the Slavs are going to come in at the end of the movie, the cavalry and horseback, or Army of Darkness reference, Henry the Red's army is going to come in and save the day. No, none of that happens. They are just a drop plot point. The Vikings lose, and the Slavs did not save them. I guess they weren't much friends after all, or something.
Yeah, you kind of anticipate that. Well, the Vikings stood up for them. They were loyal to the Slavs in their agreement. And you would have thought maybe the Slavs would have come and helped them, but they did not.
No, so curveball, big curveball. I expected the ending to be Vikings in their fort. Oh my God, we can't hold out. The Tartars are going to get us. And here comes the Slavs, and they saved the day. And
we never saw them.
Nope, never.
Mm-mm.
Maybe it happened off screen.
It must have happened off screen. Yep.
They came afterwards, way afterwards, like, oh, well, we missed the party. We're out of here.
Yep.
Plot point number 2. Helga gets kidnapped with 3 handmaidens. So there's 4 women that get captive. Those other 3 ladies, they get tortured for one second, and then they disappear from the movie. When Oleg's like, oh, we got to go and free them. We got to free my wife. Well, what about the other 3 ladies? Don't you want them back too? They're nothing. Just disappear from the film. What happened to them? Did they get executed? Are they still in the Tartar castle going? We don't know that. But so back to Oleg being a terrible leader. That he didn't even want those hostages back. He was selfish. He wanted just his wife back, and the husbands of those 3 ladies could, for all he cared, I guess. What a terrible leader, and that's our hero. But no, dropped plot point with that. So again, back to the 6 writers. I'm assuming these were all things each writer brought in, and only scraps of it made it in or something, because we were just, again, confounded by some of the stuff that happened in this film because of editing, passage of time, and what seemed like important plot points that just get forgotten.
Yeah, definitely. There is I think that if they hadn't dropped those, if they had included a bit more plot, maybe a little bit more. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I feel like we never really got a whole lot to the Vikings. I mean, Burundi delivers. We know what his motivation is, but really, as we said earlier, we really don't know what the Vikings were all about, other than the fact that they had loyalty to the Slavs. That's really the extent of it. We don't really know much more than that. I was disappointed, honestly, when they decide to put Eric and Simeon on trial, because Eric is having a relationship with Simeon that is against their law. And they are judged accordingly. They're kind of in a, well, what we would have thought would be a Viking longhouse, but it is the most bland looking set ever.
Just wooden walls.
Wooden walls, there's no like symbolism, and we know that the Vikings had a lot of swirling and
Where's
you
the
know, a lot-
runes? Where's the
Yeah.
runes?
so it really kind of surprised how drab and plain it was in comparison to when you look over on the side of the Tartars and the opulence. And speaking of the opulence, we both actually cued into the dance. The obligatory dance that is in every sword and sandal film was actually good in this. It was great choreography.
It wasn't so much a belly dance. So this wasn't like a stand-in for a sexual sequence. This was recreating a battle. There was
It
all
was,
these
yeah.
dancers, these male dancers with scimitars, I think, because they're the curved sword, and they're just like whooshing around. And one belly dancer comes out that I suppose is the heroine that needs to be saved, but it looks cool. So anytime they cut away from it to show Orson Welles like being lecherous, I'm like, no, put it back on the dancers. That's what I want to see. That's some cool stuff there.
Yeah, it was again a nice twist. Instead of a belly dancer or some sort of a charm type of dance between a woman to the man that she loves or is the love interest. This was definitely a story about a people battling others, and the one standing triumphant. And I thought it was a good metaphor to Burundi, a stand-in to what he was looking to do. I think it made it very clear. The costumes were gorgeous, particularly for the Tartars. Orson Welles had this actual fabulous hat that was feathers. It was like made of feathers, or had a down of feather. Yeah, and it was beautiful black plumage. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And I went and I looked at some of the images of the Tartars, and I think they did try to emulate some of the costuming of the Tartars during the Genghis Khan time. So they did a very nice job with the costuming on that particular aspect of this epic story.
I think the last point we have, kind of to wrap things up, is to go back to something you said earlier, is how even though the Vikings and Tartars, they're very opposite in a lot of ways. The Tartars are opulent, the Vikings are not. However, both of their journeys in this film mirror each other. You said they're kind of mirroring of each other. And basically the same things happen to both. Both of them have like one of their royalty women kidnapped. Both of their leaders die at the end, and both of their leaders are bad. Arguably, Oleg, I think, is a worse leader than Burundi, who is the villain. I mean, Burundai's downfall basically is he's short-sighted and, his lust for conquest is kind of what does him in.
Mhm.
Oleg's downfall is he's just a flat out bad at his job. But the same things that happened to the Tartars happened to the Vikings and vice versa. I'm kind of a sucker for that type of stuff. It makes me think of Buster Keaton's The General, where it's like a looped storytelling where everything that happens to Buster Keaton in the beginning of the film is what he dishes out to the villains at the end of the film. And I think Mad Max Fury Road did the same thing. So it's this kind of, even though they're polar opposites of each other in the film, how much alike, very much alike they are.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Definitely a more different take on the sword and sandal, not our usual fare. Definitely not our usual themes that are within the film. But I would just say as my closing is that the film quality is pretty good. Sound is pretty good. I think there's a couple of little like it almost, I thought that the film paused for a moment, but otherwise, I mean, for an older film that's not as well known, they definitely took some time with this. Is it
It's
Warner
Warner.
Brothers?
Since
Oh,
it's
okay.
a Warner film and produced by them, so obviously their vault has a finer print than what we're used
Yeah.
to with the more Italian produced stuff, which was more disposable. So
Mhm.
even though the edition I have is just an old DVD, there's no HD version of this. There's no special features or anything. So someone out there, if they want to take what we said and edit it into an audio commentary, go for it.
Yeah, but I would say it's definitely worth a watch. And again, gives a different perspective to the genre.
Yeah. Despite a lot of the cringiness, especially from Victor Mature and the person that played Eric, despite the blatant racism and yellowface,
Mhm.
those are the downers, and unfortunately, they're pretty big downers. But what the movie does and how it veers so much away from the standard formula is that's feeling what makes it fascinating for sure.
Mhm. Yep, and
Wow.
that is our discussion.
And you guys have always given very detailed analyses of the films that you're reviewing, but today you outdid yourselves.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure what Bella Cortez film are we doing next? I think we kind of.
I don't know. We'll have to grab another one. We'll continue our Bella Cortez. I feel bad that we couldn't talk about her a bit more in this one, but that's just kind of the limitation of the film that should have used her more because she has a lot to offer, and the movie didn't do that. So shame on you, movie. Bad. You should have done more than just a background damsel in distress. Bad. Bella Cortez, awesome.
I will inform Bella of your retrospective. This should be up by tomorrow noon.
Oh, cool. Sorry we cut out earlier. I don't know what happened there, but
Yeah, technical difficulties, I guess.
This is the age of information. It's ruled by Hermes, so these things are inevitable. It's how we deal with them and how we move past them and move forward. Thank you so very much, oh scholars from the edge of time. You're awesome people, you're awesome scholars, and you're awesome friends. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us tonight. And I look forward to our next conversation, be it on the air or off the air.
yeah, we look forward to seeing you next month. And between now and then, this weekend's Easter, so grab your favorite biblical peplum, and that favorite biblical peplum better be
Uh-oh.
Fist of Jesus.
I haven't seen that one yet. I've heard of it.
It's 15 minutes long. It's awesome. We'll have to do that one sometime on a shorter episode. But yeah, grab your favorite biblical peplum this weekend and have fun. But we look forward to talking to you next month as we continue our Bella Cortez retrospective.
Thank you very much, and joyous journeys and amazing adventures to you, and success in all your ventures.
And to you, Hercules.
Thank you.